This show is not intended for the politically correct or the closed-minded. Enter at the risk of opening your eyes. You have been warned.
Why does the media attack an issue? To get primetime ratings?
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
A moment comes when we step out from the old to the new, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance.
To kind of catapult the propaganda.
You are listening to Open Eyes with your host, Ira Robinson. From the normal to the paranormal, from government cover-ups to the depths of our consciousness, we aim to explore all things. From the dawn of prehistory to current events, no topic is forbidden and nothing remains hidden.
No more secrets.
Open your eyes and open your mind to the fact that life as we know it is not as we have been taught. Join us at LateNightInTheMidlands.com or OpenEyesNetwork.com as we take this brief journey through the depths of the cosmos and explore what it really means to be human.
Many peoples have sacrificed their liberties, only to learn to their sorrow that deceit and mockery, poverty and tyranny are their reward.
Whether you're online or offline, intercontinental or intergalactic, hello, and welcome to Open Eyes. Today is Monday, March 9th, 2015, and boy oh boy, I hope you're ready for an interesting show. I want to say ahead of time, I apologize for missing my episode on Friday. I had, well, it was a bit of a mess on Thursday. We had a lot of things end up occurring here locally at home. My computer chair ended up breaking. I ended up having all kinds of computer problems end up happening, not with my computer, but with one of my children's computers. And, oh boy, it was just a big mess. One thing after the other. It completely drained my energy. I had nothing left to give, basically. So I decided to just take the day off and kind of give myself a little bit of an extra long weekend for you guys. Lo and behold, it turns out I actually did at least an hour on Late Night in the Midlands with Michael Vera on Friday night. So it was, you guys still heard me one way or the other. But yeah, so I decided to skip the episode on Friday, and I moved the topic that I was going to speak about then to tonight. The topic is Native American myths and legends and how maybe they associate a little bit with today, and why it's actually important to talk about. So before I get to all that, I want to let you guys know, those of you who are interested, because I know that many of you have asked me over time about it all. We did end up getting the results back as far as Crystal, my daughter, is concerned. The doctor basically is convinced that it is not a seizure disorder, that it's not something neurological that's happening, but that it may be related to something with her heart or blood pressure or something along those lines. So more testing to go. In the meantime, we're taking good care of her. We're making sure that she is as healthy as she can possibly be, and she's healthy and happy. But yeah, so we're in for more testing. We're in for a little bit of a ride with her, I think. But as things progress, we'll come out with the information and let you guys know, because I know you guys have been sending a lot of prayers her way and a lot of good thoughts, and I really appreciate it. I really do. It makes a big difference. I fully believe it. So I wanted to make sure that you guys knew about all of that. So on to the news. I have a few stories that I want to cover for you guys before the break and before I get into the main topic for tonight. The first one that I have, it ties into something that I've been talking about a lot of late. Well, and not just of late, but I talk about a lot because it's relating to vaccines, and you guys know that's a passion point for me. But I ran across a news article for you guys that says, if you are one of those individuals who received the flu vaccine this season and still got the flu, chances are good you've got company. Federal officials this week said the season's flu vaccine, already acknowledged to be not highly effective, is performing worse than earlier estimated. The vaccine is only 18% effective against the dominant H3N2 strain of the flu in circulation, according to Health Day, a National Institute of Health online news publication. That's down from a predicted effectiveness level of around 23%, which was estimated in mid-January. They, in the article, also go into the fact that when it comes to those who are most susceptible to the flu, in other words, those who are younger than 2 years of age, it is actually only 15% effective in them. Now, the question I have regarding all of this is, at what point does it go from being quote-unquote ineffective to just being a complete failure? I mean, if, for instance, I was to take a test and I got 18% correct, that would be a fail, right? I would have to completely redo things. That would be a total and epic failure. And yet, when it comes to these vaccines, oh, well, 18% is better than no percent, so you still need to get vaccinated. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous, guys. And yes, I know that I point out and push the vaccine idea a lot, but I think that it's something that is really important for people to understand. We are being tricked. We are being fooled. We are being lied to on a constant basis when it comes to these vaccines, their efficacy, their reason for being, and they just keep on going with it. I mean, here you have these guys now saying 18% effectiveness, down from what they originally estimated at 23% effectiveness. And even then, for those who are the most susceptible, only 15% effectiveness. Well, the question I have is, how much of that 18% effectiveness can just be marked down to the person's immune system kicking in and fighting it off? You know, it's just, guys, seriously, pay attention to it all. Ask questions and figure out the truth for yourself. I really had to bring that one to you, though. 18%, and yet it's still at least better than no percent. In the meantime, you're taking your damage, you're taking your everything that goes with it. Silliness ensues. Researchers image wave particle duality light for the first time ever. It is well known that light is capable of acting like a particle as well as a wave. However, these have always been viewed as completely separate forms, not embodying both at once. Quantum mechanics states that light should have both attributes simultaneously, but that phenomenon has not been imaged directly until now. A team of researchers has finally been able to photograph the quantum wave particle duality of light, and they have described the work in the open access paper published in Nature Communications. This will help researchers better understand the fundamental nature of light and could even help to assist the development of quantum computing and a number of other technologies. So for those of you who don't know exactly what it's referring to here, the idea is that particles of light can be both waves and particles at the same time. It goes into the idea in quantum mechanics of all possibilities or all potentials existing at all moments in time and only coming to fruition when an observation is made. So a light particle or a light, wave, for instance, is both a wave and a particle at the same time, but it does not become one or the other until it has actually been observed to be one or the other. So what they did here is they have basically taken a photograph of a particle of light or of a beam of light, and they've been able to capture the idea that it is both at the same time. So this pushes again forward the idea that the quantum mechanics viewpoint of reality is the likely winner of things. And so it's also fascinating to me. You know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, but I'm fascinated by the idea of quantum mechanics and all of the different things that it can mean for us and our society and us as human beings. So the fact that this type of thing was able to be accomplished, I think, is a pretty interesting feat of science. And it definitely can lead forward to some very interesting concepts technology-wise. In a quote from the article, this is from the senior author Fabrizio Carbone, from École. I'm sorry, this is a French word. École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, in Switzerland. No, I'm sorry, it's Swiss. He said, this experiment demonstrates that for the first time ever, we can film quantum mechanics and its paradoxical nature directly. Being able to image and control quantum phenomenon at the nanometer scale like this opens up a new route towards quantum computing. Now, the idea with quantum computing is really fascinating. I definitely think that that's the way that technology is going, even if they say that there are issues in making it happen. I do actually think that there are examples of quantum computers out there right now that are being used. We just don't really have access to them yet, basically. But quantum computing is something potentially very, very powerful. And it really is the wave of the future, I think. Whether for good or bad, it is definitely the wave of the future. Now, the next thing that I ran across is not an article, but it is actually it's an advertisement that I saw listed on Craigslist. I wanted to bring this to you guys because this is not the first time that this type of thing has been released. And each time that something like this has been released in the past, things have ended up happening. So let me read the advertisement here to you. And I'll have the link for this actually on my website for the show notes for this show. We are military contractors working directly with the U.S. Marine Corps, assisting them with their immersive simulation training program. Currently, we are looking for role players of Ukrainian and/or Russian ethnicity and language skills. We need men ranging from 18 to 65 years of age. This is a temporary part-time on-call work based on need and availability. At the moment, we are staffing for an upcoming training to take place on March 29th to the 31st of 2015. The scheduled hours will vary from 8 to 12 hours per working day. Now, this is not the first time that this has happened. This has happened before during the events before the Boston bombing happened. This happened before Sandy Hook happened. These type of things are put out looking for those crisis actors, for the false flags that end up happening. We see this over and over again. It has been proven. You can look out there and you will find the proof showing that every time one of these drills ends up happening, that ends up turning into a false flag event, just before it, one of these advertisements was put out. And 9 times out of 10, it's been on Craigslist. So here we have this situation where they are now calling for Ukrainian and or Russian speaking men to participate in some kind of operation between the 29th and the 31st of March. So just 2 weeks away? 2.5 weeks. So pay attention to this, guys. I'm not saying that there is definitely going to be something that happens, but I am saying that it is a point of curiosity, and it is definitely something that we need to pay attention to and keep an eye on. And remember this article or this advertisement, if something were to happen around that time period, maybe even towards the middle of April or the end of April, involving people who are speaking either Russian or Ukrainian. And remember that this advertisement was put out, and you'll know that whatever event ends up happening was done as a false flag, that they are currently working towards training this event up. And again, it's not the first time that this has happened. So it's interesting. I'm a little concerned about it, and I'm hoping that it is not anything more than just a drill. But how many times have we seen through experience that those drills turn out to be something of note, something very worthy of note? You know what? Just recently, there was the UFO crash that happened in Canada. And we brought you that information here on Open Eyes, as well as Michael Vera bringing it to you guys on Late Night in the Midlands over at latenightinthemidlands.com. He contacted the people who are on the reservations up there, talked to a few people, didn't get any answers until finally the last one that he talked to said that the thing that crashed was not a plane. They could not say what it was, but they could verify that it was not a plane. So we have this idea of a UFO crash happening at a lake up in Canada. And at the same time that this thing was going on, well, actually just a few days before it, there was the, they called it Arctic bison, I believe it was called. The Canadian military did an exercise there where they were basically training to do rescues. They were training to do search and rescues on wreckage, not UFO wreckage, of course, but on wreckages, on accidents, on plane crashes, and that sort of thing. And that the public relations would also be getting rehearsals with it all as well during this time period. So again, a drill happens. And at the same time a drill happens, you have an actual event occurring. It's no coincidence, guys. There are no coincidences when it comes to this stuff. And that's something you guys really need to learn and understand really well. Because not many people realize that. Not many people recognize that when you see quote unquote coincidences occurring, there's actually something to it. It was actually planned very much ahead of time. So guys, I'm going to take a break here real quick. When we come back, I'm going to start getting into the Native American legends, going into some of the creation myths, going into some of the ideas of the serpent, going into some of the ideas of the flood, and quite a few other things as well. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this episode. So hang out with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Ben Franklin said, "If you do the same thing tomorrow as you did today, you're going to get the same tomorrow as you got today." Changing the world starts with you, and changing you starts with changing the way you think. Late Night in the Midlands can help. Listen to all of our shows at latenightinthemidlands.com, because things really do need to change. To hide the truth, once you know it, makes you think that you are better than everyone else. It makes you into the type of person who says, "Ooh, I have a secret," but you're not ready to hear it yet. However, for $39.95, I'll let you in on the secret. You'll lead the people to the promised land for the cheap price of 3 easy payments of 1/3 of their soul apiece.
The L&M Radio Network and Late Night in the Midlands depends on you, the listener. Without you, there would be no us. So help us continue to bring you the best guests with the best information and subscribe today. Information on becoming an L&M subscriber can be found at the top of LateNightInTheMidlands.com. Just click the About Subscriptions tab and become part of the family while helping the truth stay alive. And while you're at it, maybe subscriptions aren't for you. A one-time donation helps as well. Click that donate button on the right side of LateNightInTheMidlands.com and help us help you.
They went into the homes now, the powers that be, and told us that you cannot discipline your children anymore. And if you discipline your children, you were going to jail. Then they went into the public schools and took discipline out of there. So when we acted up in there, they put our boys into something called special ed classes. And as you know, those special ed classes are nothing but holding cells until they can go to the state prison. If we can have them convicted for a felony, then once they get out of prison, they cannot get a job because of that. And then if they happen to eke out and find a job, then they have to pay taxes on a job, yet they cannot vote. I call that taxation without representation. They did a grand thing when they took that discipline away from us, because when they made our parents afraid to discipline the children, then what happened? We found out that the teachers were afraid of the principals were scared of the superintendent was scared of the school board was scared of the parents were scared of the children, and the children ain't scared of nobody.
Have you been looking for answers? Have you been seeking the truth but can't seem to find it? Late Night in the Midlands has the answers for you. Whether you are interested in the paranormal, aliens and UFOs, alternative health information, or just a little hope and inspiration, we have a show for you. Late Night in the Midlands, Open Eyes, The Red Pill Reality Show, The Secret Teachings, Paranormal Perceptions, and The Turning of the Wheel. All here on the L&M Network for you to listen to at any time that you want. Everything is free to listen to, and though it is not required, we are listener supported, and all donations are deeply appreciated. You will not find shows like these in the mainstream media. Go to LateNightInTheMidlands.com to listen. The L&M Network, where the truth has no fear. Hello and welcome back to Open Eyes. Thank you for sticking around through that break. I really appreciate it. I hope that you guys are well rested in the mind and well rested in the body, and I hope that you have recovered from the weekend, whatever it is that you may have been doing. We've had a lot of stuff that's been going on. We've had a lot of events that have been occurring that are just absolutely insane. We've been talking about it a lot on the network. We've been talking about it a lot on my show that, well, it seems like things are really falling out of control, and a lot of things are falling, well, into kind of a pit of despair and doom and gloom. I wanted to do tonight's episode sort of as a way to get away from this, a way to refresh things a little bit, a way to maybe get back to the basics a little bit. And for me, well, some of you may know this. I know that I've spoken about it before on my show, but for those of you who may be new listeners, for me, getting back to the basics means talking about my Native American roots. I'm a Miami native, and I have a lot of ties still to my tribe. I have a lot of ties to my family. I have a lot of ties to my past, to the roots that I came from, that my ancestors walked. So for me, as I said, kind of getting back to the basics or back to my roots means getting into some of the mythology and the legends that surround the Native American culture. And I'm no expert. I'm not one to be able to say, okay, well, I know all of the stories of, my people and all of this kind of stuff. No, not even close. The fact is that in a lot of cases, a lot of the mythology has been lost. A lot of the traditions and the stories have been lost. And I'll get into that kind of stuff later on. But for now, I wanted to focus, I guess, since this is the beginning portions of this episode, the beginning portions of this topic, I wanted to talk about some of the creation myths that are out there in the legends and lore of Native Americans. So one that I ran across that I wanted to talk to you guys about is it comes from the Chelan natives, and this is written out in story form, but I thought that it was really interesting. I think that you guys will get a kick out of this one. So here's the story. Long, long ago, the Creator, the great chief above, made the world. Then he made the animals and the birds, and he gave them their names: coyote, grizzly bear, deer, fox, eagle, the 4 wolf brothers, magpie, blue jay, hummingbird, and all of the others. When he had finished his work, the Creator called the animal people to him. I am going to leave you, he said, but I will come back. When I come again, I will make human beings. They will be in charge of you. The great chief returned to his home in the sky, and the animal people scattered to all parts of the world. After 12 moons, the animal people gathered to meet the Creator as he had directed. Some of them had complaints. Blue jay, meadowlark, and coyote did not like their names. Each of them asked to be some other creature. No, said the Creator, I have given you your names. There is no change. My word is law. Because you have tried to change my law, I will not make the human being this time. Because you have disobeyed me, you have soiled what I brought with me. I plan to change it into a human being. Instead, I will put it in water to be washed for many moons and many snows, until it is clean again. Then he took something from his right side, and he put it in the river. It swam, and the Creator named it Beaver. Now I will give you another law, said the great chief above. The one of you who keeps strong and good will take Beaver from the water, and he will make it into a human being. I will tell you now what to do. Divide Beaver into 12 parts. Take each part to a different place and breathe into it your own breath. Wake it up. It will be a human being with your breath. Give it half of your power and tell it what to do. Today I'm giving my power to one of you. He will have it as long as he is good. When the Creator had finished speaking, all of the creatures started for their homes, all except Coyote. The great chief had a special word for Coyote. "You are to be the head of all the creatures, Coyote. You are a power just like me now, and I will help you to do your work. Soon the creatures and all the other things that I have made will become bad. They will fight and they will eat each other. It is your duty to keep them as peaceful as you can. When you have finished your work, we will meet again in this land towards the east. If you have been good, and if you tell the truth and obey me, you can make the human being from beaver. If you have done wrong, someone else will make him." Then the Creator went away. It happened as the Creator had foretold. Everywhere the things that he had created did wrong. The mountains swallowed the creatures. The winds blew them away. Coyote stopped the mountains and stopped the winds, and he rescued the creatures. One winter, after North Wind had killed many people, Coyote made a law for him. "Hereafter you can kill only those who make fun of you." Everywhere Coyote went, he made the world better for the animal people and better for the human beings that have yet to be created. When he had finished his work, he knew that it was time to meet the Creator again. Coyote thought that he had been good, that he would be the one to make the first human being. But he was mistaken. He thought that he had had as much power as the Creator. So he tried a second time to change the laws of the great chief above. "Some other creature will make the human being," the Creator told Coyote. "I shall take you out into the ocean and give you a place to stay for all time." So Coyote walked far out across the water to an island. There the Creator stood waiting for him, beside the house that he had made. Inside the house on the west side stood a black suit of clothes. On the other side hung a white suit. "Coyote, you are to wear this black suit for 6 months," said the Creator. "Then the weather will be cold and dreary. Take off the black suit and wear the white suit. Then there will be summer and everything will grow. I will give you my power not to grow old. You will live here forever and ever." Coyote stayed there, out in the ocean, and the 4 wolf brothers took his place as the head of all the animal people. Youngest wolf brother was strong and good and clever. Oldest wolf brother was worthless. So the Creator gave youngest brother the power to take beaver from the water. One morning, oldest wolf brother said to youngest brother, "I want to kill the beaver. I want his tooth for a knife." "Oh no," said second and third brothers. "Beaver is too strong for youngest brother." But youngest wolf said to his brothers, "Make 4 spears. For oldest brother, make a spear with 4 forks. For me, make a spear with 1 fork. Make a 2-forked and a 3-forked spear for yourselves. I will try my best to get Beaver so that we can kill him." All the animal persons had seen Beaver and his home. They knew where he had lived. They knew what a big creature that he was. His family of young beavers lived with him. The animal persons were afraid that youngest wolf brother would fail to capture Beaver and would fail to make the human being. Second and third wolf brothers also were afraid. "I fear we will lose youngest brother," they said to each other, but they made the 4 spears that he had asked for. At dusk, the wolf brothers tore down the dam at the beaver's home, and all the little beavers ran out. About midnight, the larger beavers came out. They were so many, and they made so much noise that they sounded like thunder. Then the big beaver ran out, the one that the Creator had put into the water to become clean. "Let's quit," said oldest brother, for he was afraid. "Let's not try to kill him." "No," said youngest brother, "I will not stop." Oldest wolf brother fell down. Third brother fell down. Second brother fell down. Lightning flashed. The beavers still sounded like thunder. Youngest brother took the 4-forked spear and tried to strike Big Beaver with it. It broke. The 3-forked spear and the 2-forked spear broke as well. Then he took his own 1-forked spear, and it did not break. He pierced the skin of Big Beaver and stayed there. Out of the lake, down the creek, and down Big River, Beaver swam, dragging youngest brother after it. Youngest brother told his brothers, "You stay here. If I don't return with Beaver in 3 days, you'll know that I'm dead." 3 days later, all the animal persons gathered at a level place at the foot of the mountain. Soon they saw youngest brother coming. He had killed Beaver, and he was carrying it. He said, "You remember that the Creator told us to cut it into 12 pieces, but he could only divide it into 11 pieces. Then he gave directions. Fox, you're a good runner. Hummingbird and Horsefly, you can fly fast. Take this piece of beaver flesh over to that place and wake it up. Give it your breath. Youngest brother gave other pieces to other animal people and told them where to go. They took the liver to Clearwater River, and it became the Nez Perce Indians. They took the heart across the mountains, and it became the Methou Indians. Other parts became the Spokane people, the Lake people, the Flathead people. Each of the 11 pieces became a different tribe. There have to be 12 tribes, said youngest brother. Maybe the Creator thinks that we should use the blood for the last one. Take the blood across the shining mountains and wake it up over there. It will become the Blackfeet. When an animal person woke the piece of beaver flesh and breathed into it, he told the new human being what to do and what to eat. He taught them everything that he needed to know in order to survive, and thus became humans. That is according to the Chilean legend. So I wanted to read that whole thing. I know that was a little long, but I wanted to read that whole thing because to me it's important understanding. In this, you have the idea that there are supposed to be 12 different tribes of human beings that are out there that needed to be created. And that number 12 is actually very significant. If you look back in legends and mythos from all across the globe, you always see the number 12 present. It is a sacred number no matter where you go. So I find that interesting. How did that start out? You know, that's the question that comes to the mind. How did this number become such a sacred number? You see it in the Hebrew legends or the Israelite idea where there are 12 different tribes of Israel. You have with Christ, you have the 12 disciples and so on and so forth. And the 12 judges, and it's the number 12 is so significant, and I'm not going to get into that here because that actually could tie into a whole different episode that I'm going to get into at a later point in time. But I wanted to bring that idea up that even the Native Americans, which supposedly had no connections or no ties to anywhere else in the world, also held this number to be a sacred number and held this number as being of something of great importance and great significance. Enough so that it was actually part of the creation myth of mankind, that mankind is associated with that number. So it's interesting to me. Now, another creation myth that I wanted to talk about was one that comes from the Cherokee. This one is a really interesting one, I think, because this one kind of resembles ones that you may be familiar with. And I'll go into reasons why here after you've listened to this. So here's the story, according to the Cherokee. Long ago, before there were any people, the world was young and water covered everything. The earth was a great island floating above the seas, suspended by 4 rawhide ropes representing the 4 sacred directions. It hung down from the crystal sky. There were no people, but the animals lived in a home above the rainbow. Needing space, they sent Water Beetle to search for room under the seas. Water Beetle dove deep and brought up mud that spread quickly, turning it into land that was flat and too soft and wet for the animals to live on. Grandfather Buzzard was sent to see if the land had hardened. When he flew over the earth, he found that the mud became solid. He flapped in for a closer look. The wind from his wings created valleys and mountains, and that's why the Cherokee territory has so many mountains today. As the earth stiffened, the animals came down from the rainbow. It was still dark. They needed light, so they pulled the sun out from behind the rainbow, but it was too bright and hot. A solution was urgently needed. The shamans were told to place the sun higher in the sky. A path was made for it to travel, from east to west, so that all inhabitants could share in the light. The plants were placed upon the earth. The Creator told the plants and animals to stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights. Only a few animals managed to do so, including the owls and the mountain lions, and they were rewarded with the power to see in the dark. Among the plants, only the cedars, spruces, and pines remained awake. The Creator told these plants that they would keep their hair during the wintertime, while the other plants would lose theirs. People were created last. The women were able to have babies every 7 days. They reproduced so quickly that the Creator feared that the world would soon become too crowded. So after that, the women would only have 1 child per year, and it has been that way ever since. So the interesting take with this is the idea that, well, it sort of actually falls right in line with the biblical creation story, for instance. For those of you who are Christian and follow that idealism, you can see that the creation story in the Cherokee legends follow the creation story in the Bible, almost actually event for event. The only difference is the animals were the ones that were helping out with the creation of everything. So one other thing that I thought was interesting with it, though, and this is not the only one that was this way. There are many others that are out there that have the idea that things started off with water, that water basically covered the earth, that there was nothing but water. Many of the legends have that in mind. And the biblical creation story actually is exactly the same way as well. The first few verses of the Bible speak about the Spirit of God floating above the waters in the beginning of things, before the sunlight came and started to dry up in the water into the lands. So even they had water as the originating story of things. So I found that to be very, again, interesting. The fact that so many diverse people from so far away of each other, at least according to modern thinking, being disconnected from each other, that there was no way that they could have shared information or legends. And yet they have the exact same type of stories occurring and the exact same types of information contained within them. And if you don't think that these guys had any connections with all the other places in the world, you're wrong. Look at the way that all of the things get laid out in all of the native traditions around the world. You see so many different diverse cultures that supposedly never had contact doing the exact same things. You see the Egyptians and the Mayans and the Incans creating huge, elaborate pyramids. You see megalithic structures all around the world being created at the exact same time period, and yet these cultures supposedly had no contact with each other. You see, either there was some type of thing that was going on where there was a civilization greater than what we have right now, or maybe even on par with what we have right now, that was in place during that time period and was a worldwide civilization, and for some reason became disconnected and fell apart, hearkening back to the stories of Atlantis and Lemuria and Mu and all of that. It was either something along those lines or something to the idea of the creative conscious of humanity coming up with ideas basically at the same time without any input from each other. A connection of consciousness, so to speak, that a group of people had an idea and started doing something, and it started to pass into the collective unconscious of the rest of humanity. That same idea applies, in fact, to the 100th monkey syndrome. I don't know if you guys know about that story or not, but essentially what it is there was a group of experiments that were done where monkeys on islands that were separated from each other would be taught that if they, essentially up until this point in time when the experiment took place, the monkeys never washed their food. They never would wash their potatoes and their bananas and that sort of thing. They'd never wash them in the water. So they'd be dirt covered and that sort of thing. Well, what the scientists did as an experiment was they buried food and allowed the monkeys to find it. And then basically they would train a group of monkeys from one island to wash the food in the water before they consumed it. And they taught more and more of the monkeys how to do this until basically they got to about 100 monkeys in. And at that point, what they found is that all of the monkeys at that time including on the islands that never had contact with these other monkeys or had contact with these scientists running this experiment, would start doing the exact same thing. They all started washing their food. So it was like it caused a cascade to happen that once a certain amount of monkeys learned how to do something, boom, it was now known by all of the monkeys. It became a part of their makeup, like almost a genetic type of a makeup. And that kind of experiment, I think, is really important, because what that shows, and I'm not trying to sidetrack too much here, but this really does fit the topic, but what it shows is that it's the idea of children that are born now know almost instinctively how to use like an iPad, that they'll sit down reading an ebook and they will be able to flip through the pages of the ebook on the iPad without being shown how to do it and without anybody really teaching them how to do it. And yet, if they now tried to sit down and read a book, they would find it very difficult to do so. They don't know exactly what to do. They don't know how to turn the pages, and so on. So it's that genetic memory that we carry with us that I think carries so much of the information forward for all of humanity. And it's dependent on the culture that's going on. It's dependent on the level of civilization that is happening, where like in a certain area or a certain amount of people, you could say, all have basically the same abilities. They're kind of inborn with certain knowledge, or inborn with the knowledge that, okay, here's the way that this civilization is. So these are the skills that you're going to need to know to survive. So we're going to ingrain them into you so that you don't have to fight very hard to learn how to do it, essentially, as a survival mechanism. That would make sense on a adaptivity scale or an evolutionary scale, that something like this occurs to make it easier for the species to survive, right? So again, the idea of these different myths and legends having connections to each other, the ideas of these different civilizations that were supposedly diverse from each other having at least some concepts that were equal, I think really does tie into the idea of this collective unconsciousness, that we pull out information and ideas that are ingrained into us to help us survive. And that includes these stories. These stories are all part of it. So I wanted to get into the story of a man who was named Nunabozhu. So Nunabozhu was the hero of many stories told by Chippewa Indians. At one time, they lived on the shores of Lake Superior in what's now the states of Minnesota and Wisconsin and the province of Ontario. One day when Nunabozhu returned to his lodge after a long journey, he missed his young cousin who lived with him. He called the cousin's name, but he heard no answer. Looking around on the sand for tracks, Nunabozhu was startled by the trail of the Great Serpent. He then knew that his cousin had been seized by his enemy. Nunabozhu picked up his bow and his arrows, and he followed the tracks of the serpent. He passed the great river, climbed mountains, and crossed over valleys until he came to the shores of a deep and gloomy lake. It is now called Manitou Lake, Spirit Lake, and also the Lake of Devils. The trail of the Great Serpent led to the edge of the water. Nunabozhu could see at the bottom of the lake the house of the Great Serpent. It was filled with evil spirits, who were his servants and his companions. Their forms were monstrous and terrible. Most of them, like their master, resembled spirits. In the center of this horrible group was the Great Serpent himself, coiling his terrifying length around the cousin of Nunabozhu. The head of the serpent was red as blood. His fierce eyes glowed like fire. His entire body was armed with hard and glistening scales of every color and shade. Looking down on these twisting spirits of evil, Nunabozhu made up his mind that he would get revenge on them for the death of his cousin. He said to the clouds, "Disappear," and the clouds went out of sight. "Winds, be still at once," and the winds became still. When the air of the lake of the evil spirits had become stagnant, Nanabozu said to the sun, "Shine over the lake with all the fierceness that you can. Make the water boil." In these ways, thought Nanabozu, he would force the great serpent to seek the cool shade of the trees growing on the shores of the lake. There he would seize the enemy and get revenge. After giving his orders, Nanabozu took his bow and arrows and placed himself near the spot where he thought that the serpents would come to enjoy the shade. Then he changed himself into the broken stump of a withered tree. The winds became still, the air stagnant, and the sun shot hot rays from a cloudless sky. In time, the water of the lake became troubled, and bubbles rose to the surface. The rays of the sun had penetrated to the home of the serpents. As the water bubbled and foamed, a serpent lifted his head above the center of the lake and gazed around the shores. Soon another serpent came to the surface. Both listened for the footsteps of Nanabozu, but they heard him nowhere. "Nanabozu is sleeping," they said to one another, and then they plunged beneath the waves, which seemed to hiss as they closed over the evil spirits. Not long after, the lake became more troubled. Its water boiled from its very depths, and the hot waves dashed wildly against the rocks on its banks. Soon the great serpent came slowly to the surface of the water and moved forward to the shore. His blood-red crest glowed. The reflection from the scales was blinding as the glitter of a sleet-covered forest beneath the winter sun. He was followed by all the evil spirits. So great was their number that they soon covered the shores of the lake. When they saw the broken stump of the withered tree, they suspected that it might be one of the disguises of Nanabozu. They knew his cunning. One of the serpents approached the stump, wound its tail around it, and tried to drag it down into the lake. Nanabozu could hardly keep from crying aloud, for the tail of the monster prickled his sides, but he stood firm and he was silent. The evil spirits moved on. The great serpent glided into the forest and wound his many coils around the trees. His companions also found shade, all but one. One remained near the shore to listen for the footsteps of Nanabozu. From the stump, Nanabozu watched until all of the serpents were asleep, and the guard was intently looking in another direction. Then he silently drew an arrow from his quiver, placed it into his bow, and aimed it at the heart of the great serpent. It reached its mark. With a howl that shook the mountains and startled the wild beasts in their caves, the monster awoke. Followed by its terrified companions, which also were howling with rage and terror, the great serpent plunged into the water. At the bottom of the lake there still lay the body of Nanabozu's cousin. In their fury, the serpents tore it into 1,000 pieces. His shredded lungs rose to the surface and covered the lake with whiteness. The great serpent soon knew that he would die from his wound, but he and his companions were determined to destroy Nanabozu. They caused the water of the lake to swell upwards and to pound against the shore with the sound of many thunders. Madly the flood rolled over the land, over the tracks of Nanabozu, carrying with it rocks and trees. High on the crest of the highest wave floated the wounded great serpent. His eyes glared around him, and his hot breath mingled with the hot breath of his many companions. Nanabozu, fleeing before the angry waters, thought of his Indian children. He ran through the villages, shouting, "Run to the mountaintops! The great serpent is angry and is flooding the earth! Run! Run!" The Indians caught up their children and found safety in the mountains. Nanabozu continued his flight along the base of the western hills, and then up a high mountain beyond Lake Superior to the north. There he found many men and animals that had escaped from the flood that was already covering the valleys and plains, and even the highest hills. Still, the water continued to rise. Soon, all of the mountains were under the flood as well, except for the high one upon which stood Nanabozu. There he gathered together lumber and timber and made a raft. Upon it, the men and women and animals with him placed themselves. Almost immediately, the mountain top disappeared from their view, and they floated along the face of the waters. For many days they floated. At long last, the flood began to subside. Soon the people on the raft saw the trees on the tops of the mountains. Then they saw the mountains and hills, then the plains and the valleys. When the water disappeared from the land, the people who survived learned that the great serpent was dead, and that his companions had returned to the bottom of the lake of spirits. There they remain to this day. For fear of Nanabozu, they have never dared to come forth again. So with that story, the idea of the great serpent comes out. And I'm going to get into the topic of the serpent and the snake as far as being a symbolic object for Native Americans here in a little while. But this is, again, not the first and not the only story regarding the flood, the great deluge that ended up happening at some point in the past. And obviously, this is not the only culture that has experienced that kind of myth. The most famous example probably for you would be the idea of Noah's flood, which is actually based upon an older legend, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which came from the Sumerian era of things, written far before the Noah story was written in the book of Genesis. By probably at least 1,000 years. So this is not the only flood story that's out there. There are many actual flood stories in most cultures around the world. At some point in the past, we did experience something like this. Most people will poo-poo on that idea. Most of the quote-unquote modern experts and scientists will say, well, this kind of an event is an impossibility. This could not happen. There's not enough water on the planet to make this kind of thing occur. And technically they may be right, at least as far as we know. However, that doesn't discount the possibility that something like this did occur and that we just don't understand the mechanism in which it occurred. We don't understand it because we weren't there, and the knowledge of it, the lore of it, the information of it has been basically lost to time. And I'll go into reasons why that may be later on as well. So one more story before I take my break, which I'm going to need to do here in just a few minutes. But there's another story that I wanted to tell, which comes from the Lakota. The Lakota, and this one for me, I think is a very telling story, because this goes into the idea of there having been previous worlds and previous civilizations. So let me read this to you and see what you guys think of this. There was another world before this one, but the people of that world did not behave themselves. Displeased, the creating power set out to make a new world. He sang several songs to bring rain, which poured stronger with each song. As he sang the fourth song, the earth split apart and water gushed up through the many cracks, causing a flood. By the time that the rain stopped, all of the people and nearly all of the animals had drowned. Only Kangi the crow survived. Kangi pleaded with the creating power to make him a new place to rest. So the creating power decided that the time had come to make his new world. From his huge pipe bag, which contained all types of animals and birds, the creating power selected 4 animals known for their ability to remain underwater for a long time. He sent each in turn to retrieve a lump of mud from beneath the floodwaters. First, the loon dove down deep into the dark waters, but it was unable to reach the bottom. The otter, even with its strong, webbed feet, also failed. Next, the beaver used its large flat tail to propel itself deep under the water, but it too brought nothing back. Finally, the creating power took the turtle from his pipe bag and urged it to bring back some mud. Turtle stayed under the water for so long that everyone was sure that it had drowned. Then, with a splash, the turtle broke the water's surface. Mud filled its feet and claws, and the cracks between its upper and lower shells. Singing, the creative power shaped the mud in his hands and spread it on the water, where it was just big enough for himself and the crow. He then shook 2 long eagle wing feathers over the mud until earth spread wide and varied, overcoming the waters. Feeling sadness for the dry land, the creating power cried tears that became oceans, streams, and lakes. He named the new land Turtle Continent in honor of the turtle who provided the mud from which it was formed. The creating power then took many animals and birds from his great pipe bag and spread them across the earth. From red, white, black, and yellow earth, he made men and women. The creating power gave the people his sacred pipe and told them to live by it. He warned them about the fate of the people who came before them. He promised all would be well if all of the living things learned to live in harmony, but the world would be destroyed again if they made it bad and ugly. So again, there's the idea of the world having existed before this period in time, before the world that we currently see. And that for some reason, one way or the other, that world was destroyed by water. And that after the water inundated everything, at that point, dry land started to appear again, either through some divine intervention or alien intervention, or just based upon the fact that enough time period had passed that the waters started to evaporate out and turn into just oceans, and the dry land started to make its appearance. Maybe volcanoes, who knows? Either way, though, the world existed at some point before, multiple times actually, and that this last time it was destroyed in some kind of cataclysmic water event. So I wanted to bring that story to you because, again, this covers the idea, or ties in with the idea, that so many of the different cultures around the world, no matter where they are, no matter where they come from, and no matter how far back they go, all seem to have these equal stories to each other. I mean, I've been just reading you off the ones that are from here in America, and of course you could probably say, well, they might have had ties with each other, because their tribes would intermarry and intermingle, and they'd come together and trade stories and so on and so forth. And while that kind of thing did definitely happen, yes, it does not explain how a flood story here could equal a flood story from the Middle East if things were as people claim that they were supposed to be, or at least allegedly are, right? It's impossible according to modern thinking and modern thought. So obviously, either all of these things are just a coincidence, a happy coincidence, which if you've listened to my show at any point in time, I do not believe in coincidences. So either it is a coincidence, or there is something that we have not been told about what our pasts are, about where we come from, about what it means to be human, about where we were before, how the world exists, how it was formed, on and on and on. We are not told the full story. And unfortunately, I think that it is actually almost entirely our own fault. And I'll get into why here in a little while. So guys, I'm going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I'm going to get more into some of the other myths that you guys may not have heard about, and the idea of the sacred hoop, the medicine wheel, the dream catcher, the hoop dance, and so many other things. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. So stick around with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes after these messages. There are days that the red pill is bitter in my stomach, but I can't get it back out. I think because I have to. I speak because I have no choice. I walk through this dark age we're in with open eyes. Listen to Open Eyes on LateNightInTheMidlands.com. And together, maybe we won't stumble and fall. The Late Night in the Midlands radio network is deeply devoted to you, the listener. We feel it is necessary to bring you all of the information that you can use in your life. Each and every day you will find something to listen to here. And whether you come away from the shows informed, inspired, or entertained, it is our passion. We don't bow to corporations, and we don't have handlers to tell us what not to talk about. We bring you everything. Late Night in the Midlands, however, is fully listener-supported. We need your help to stay on the air, and to make sure that we get the bills paid. We need your help to keep the truth alive. If you feel that you have gotten anything out of Late Night in the Midlands, we would appreciate your support. You can become a subscriber and help us out on a monthly basis, or if you'd like, a one-time donation is fully appreciated as well. Every year, the average household in America spends over $3,000 on entertainment alone. If you could help us with just a tiny fraction of that amount, you would make all of the difference. Go to latenightinthemidlands.com and click on the subscribe button. Thank you, and as always, keep yourself informed. You may be suffering from OMS, Open Mind Syndrome. This disorder can be a burden on those suffering from it, as they see the insanity in the world around them. Symptoms of this disorder are likely to be not accepting the status quo, talking frequently about issues that are really important, studying things that are not acceptable by the mainstream thinking, and asking too many questions. This disease can spread rapidly, even over the internet and airwaves. It is becoming an epidemic. If you or someone you know suffers from open mind syndrome, do not seek help. It is apparent that this condition is actually the normal human response to information. In fact, it is best to interact often with fellow sufferers at latenightinthemidlands.com to remain open-minded. Open Mind Syndrome. It's no joke.
Videos of Jonathan Gruber have now become kind of almost a hit series.
Stupid to understand the difference. First by mislabeling. The stupidity of the American voter or whatever.
The fact that some advisor who never worked on our staff expressed an opinion that I completely disagree with in terms of the voters is no reflection on the actual process that was run.
Many of them I've stolen ideas from liberally. John Gruber.
You know, basic exploitation of the lack of economic understanding of the American voter.
I don't know who he is. He didn't help write our bill. I don't know if you have seen Jonathan Gruber of MIT's analysis of the what the comparison is to the status quo.
They'll call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever.
Let me say, if you look up stupid in the dictionary, you find Gruber's picture.
But I sent it because so many people worked so hard, including John Gruber.
And the only way we could take it on was first by mislabeling it.
Mr. Gruber was an advisor.
The problem is not that Gruber helped them put Obamacare together because he was the man.
Some advisor who never worked on our staff.
The architect Jonathan Gruber reportedly has had more than a dozen appointments to visit the White House since Democrats began drafting the health care law.
Easier to talk about 6 and 8-year-old videos.
The realistic guy's like, look, I can't just do this. He said, it's just not going to happen politically. The bill will not pass. That ultimately became the genesis of what's called the Cadillac tax.
Some advisor who never worked on our staff.
He was certainly viewed as an important figure in helping to put Obamacare together.
Professor, do you really think the American voters are stupid?
No comment.
Hello there. Thank you for sticking around through that break. I really appreciate that you guys are so patient with these breaks and with these commercials, but you know, the bills have to be paid, right? What bills, right? Anyways, hello again. My name is Ira, and you are listening to Open Eyes. I really hope that you guys find this this topic tonight interesting. We've been talking about the Native American legends and myths that, well, they have been passed down through the many centuries and millennia, and how they, I guess you could say, tie in with different aspects of stories from other locations around the world, from other cultures that are widespread and diverse, that supposedly have no connection with each other. The creation myths are all very similar. There are flood myths that are very similar from, again, all over the world, and from cultures that never, at least according to modern expert thought, never had any kind of interaction together. And yet here you go. Here you have all of these stories that are containing extremely similar subjects. I have another story that I wanted to tell you guys that I found was interesting. It relates to the one that I said earlier about Nanabuzu with the flood that happened there. This is a different take on the same story, and again, this ties into other familiar stories from around the world. So let me read this to you and see what you guys think. One very remarkable character reported in legends, dimly seen through the mists of untold centuries, is Kwiwisen's Nanabuzu, meaning in Algonquin dialect, the greatest clown boy in the world. I love that name. When he became a man, he was not only a great prophet among his people, but a giant of such marvelous strength that he could wield his war club with force enough to shatter in pieces the largest pine tree. His hunting dog was a monstrous black wolf, as large as a full-grown buffalo, with long soft hair and eyes that shone in the night like the moon. The deity of the sea saw the charming beauty of this wolf dog, and was so extremely jealous of him that he was determined to take his life. So he appeared before him in the form of a deer. And as the dog rushed to seize him, he was grasped by the deity and thrown into the depths of the sea. He then made a great barbecue and invited his guests, that were whales, serpents, and all of the monsters of the deep, that they might exult and rejoice with him that he had slain the dog of the prophet. When Seer Clown learned of the fate of his noble dog, through the cunning of Wagush the fox, whose keen eyes saw the deception that cost the wolf dog his life, he sought to take revenge. So he went at once to the place where the latter was accustomed to come on land with his monster servants to bathe in the sunshine, and there he concealed himself among the tall rushes until the caravan of the deep came ashore. When they had fallen fast asleep, he drew his giant bow, twice as long as he was tall, and shot a poisoned arrow that pierced Nebenmanitou, the water god, through the heart. Nebenmanitou rolled into the sea and cried, "Revenge! Revenge!" Then all of the assembled monsters of the deep rushed headlong after the slayer of their king. The prophet fled in consternation before the outraged creatures that had hurled after him. Mountains of water, which swept down the forests like grass before the whirlwind. He continued to flee before the raging flood, but he could find no dry land. In sore despair, he then called upon the God of heaven to save him, when there appeared before him a great canoe, in which were pairs of all kinds of land beasts and birds, being rowed by a most beautiful maiden, who let down a rope and drew him into the boat. The flood raged on, but though mountains of water were continually hurled after the prophet, he was safe. When he had floated on the water many days, he ordered Almilk, the beaver, to dive down and, if he could, reach the bottom, to bring up some earth. Down he plunged, but in a few minutes he came floating back up to the surface lifeless. the prophet pulled him into the boat, blew into his mouth, and he became alive again. He then said to Waljashik, the muskrat, "You are the best diver among the animal creation. Go down to the bottom and bring me up some earth, out of which I'll create a new world. We can't live on the face of the deep for much longer." Down plunged the muskrat, but, like the beaver, he too soon came to the surface lifeless, and he was drawn into the boat. The prophet blew into his mouth, and he became alive again. In his paw, however, was found a small quantity of earth, which the prophet rolled into a small ball and tied to the neck of Kakigi, the raven, saying, "Go and fly over the surface of the deep, so that dry land can appear." The raven did so. The waters rolled away, the world resumed its former shape, and, in the course of time, the maiden and the prophet were united and repeopled the world. So, in this story, again, you see the idea of some kind of serpent being being the epitome of evil, being the epitome of darkness, being the epitome of jealousy and rage, and so on and so forth. That it's the controller of the mountains, it's of the monsters, it's the controller of the deep, and so on and so forth. And this is not an unfamiliar story, especially if, for instance, you are the type of person who thinks about, I guess you could say, sort of fringy kind of subjects. We have these ideas that are passed down for years now, talking about how there are serpent beings, that there are reptilians that are living among us. You might hear talk about like shape-shifting reptilians. I actually did an episode about those. Let's see, it was 2 weeks ago now, actually. It was during my Bigfoot Enigma episode. If you go back into my archives on OpenEyesNetwork.com, you can listen to that episode, and you can hear some of the information that I gave out as far as the serpent beings are concerned, as far as the reptilians are concerned. But suffice it to say that my thoughts on things are that what we have is kind of two possibilities. Either, well, I guess three, really. I mean, first, the possibility is that it's all made up. It's just myths and legends that are passed down, and that we basically are just taking the ball and running with it. We can't discount that possibility, right? But the idea is that there are so many different stories that have been passed down from many different cultures in regards to these serpent beings or these serpent people, reptilians, whatever it is that you want to call them, that to sit and think that, well, this is just made up, I don't know. I guess I just don't agree with that idea. Every legend has a grain of truth to it. Every lie has a grain of truth to it. Every myth out there comes from some basis of truth. So is there a possibility that there are some kind of reptilian beings or serpent beings or whatever? Yeah, I totally think that there is. I absolutely believe that there is. I've had some experiences myself that sort of, I guess you could say, steer me into that direction of truth of the matters. But what are they exactly? I don't know. My thought is that maybe it is leftovers of the Saurians that were once dominant here on Earth before things ended cataclysmically for them. Maybe in some parts of the world that are very far-flung and secluded, maybe dinosaurs did evolve into a more sentient species, and that they have become more humanoid in nature, and so on and so forth. Maybe they live underground. Maybe that is where the ideas of the inner earth or the inner world or whatever you want to call it comes from, that they are down there, that they have evolved in seclusion there, away from prying human eyes, prying primate eyes, so to speak. And that maybe they have developed technologies. They've been around for a lot longer than we have, after all, right? 60 million years almost, or whatever. So the idea does not surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if that is how things really are. But the idea of the serpent people, in so many of the different societies around the world, you see the idea that these serpent beings are of the bad, that they're evil. There's I don't know, I guess you could say some kind of always evil agenda going on with them. And that brings me to my third possibility, which is that it could be just a matter of these stories are created because we as human beings know that a lot of snakes out there, a lot of serpents out there are poisonous, that if they were to bite us, it'd be very bad for us. And so we make up stories basically to teach our children that they need to stay away from serpents, that they're bad, that they're very, horrific things, and you need to keep away from them so that they don't bite you and kill you. I don't discount that possibility either. And that may be a very likely possibility. So just kind of throwing that out there for everybody. It could be that those are the way it is. Now, the idea though too is that even in Native American cultures, as well as a lot of other cultures around the world, the serpents are actually looked at in a different way, that they are actually of a beneficial type of an entity. So you have the Incas, the Mayas, who had the idea of Quetzalcoatl or the feathered serpents, where these serpent beings actually handed out civilization to mankind. That it was because of them that we have the civilizations that we have today, or, then, that we've now kind of descended into at this point in time. Excuse me. But the idea is that these are not the only cultures that do. The Chinese, for instance, also have similar stories where the dragons, some of the great dragons in their mythology, are very wise, very caring and compassionate, that they are concerned about the human race and are trying to help the human race to survive and evolve and so on and so forth. So there is sort of this strange duality when it comes to the idea of the serpent, and it does fall right into line with the Native American traditions and legends. You have, for instance, on the in the Sioux, you have the information about Unkatila, which is the horned snake spirit. Unkatila was is sort of the opposite, or the oppositional force of the Thunderbirds, which are the creative force, you could say, in the world. That the Thunderbirds are sent by Creator or the Great Spirit, basically, to hold creation in their wings and all of that stuff. And that the serpents, basically, Unkatila is against the Thunderbirds, that it tries to undo creation, essentially. So that's one way to, I guess, look at the information as far as the serpent beings are concerned. There really are a lot of legends within the Native American cultures, and I recommend doing some research into it. It's interesting to see how they tie in with some of the serpent legends from, let's say, the Middle East, for instance, where you have the idea of the devil being associated with some kind of serpent and all of that because of the Garden of Eden and so forth, even though that's been completely misinterpreted and interpolated. But we'll get into that in another episode. So other animal spirits as well have great significance, of course, to the Native American peoples. One animal that I wanted to talk about, for instance, is coyote. You heard me speak about coyote a couple of times in a couple of the stories that I read here. Coyote is really important to many Native American legends. The reason why is because coyote is sort of I guess you could say is kind of an ultimate representation of mankind themselves. Coyote in the Native American traditions is by and large the trickster, is there, I guess you could say, as an agent of chaos, that they are, the coyote is there to instill chaotic actions in order for a new order of things to come from. And one interesting thing is also that as far as Coyote being the trickster is concerned, another aspect of Coyote is the rabbit. So you have sort of, I guess you could say a strange dichotomy there, because usually the coyote eats the rabbit, right? But in the traditions of things, both of them are the tricksters, and so therefore both of them are interchangeable with each other. When you see coyote, you see rabbit. When you see rabbit, you see coyote. They're one and the same, basically. So that goes into the idea of totemic spirits and vision quests and so on and so forth, which I'm not really going to have time to get into tonight, although I really kind of wanted to. But I know that I'm going to be running short on time with other things that I wanted to talk about in this episode. But suffice it to say, I will get into that in another episode, because I think that the idea of the vision quest and the totemic spirits in regards to the Native American way of thinking is a really important one, and it's an important one for society today, actually. But again, the idea of Coyote as an agent of chaos, bringing new order out of things, is something that is really, I guess you could say, endemic in Native American legends. In fact, if you look at some of the stories that are out there, you'll see that Coyote is very trusted actually by the creator. And a lot of people, when they hear about Native American legends and they hear some of the stories regarding Coyote, I guess most people kind of associate or give a connotation with it to the idea of the devil or Satan or something like that. And that's actually not the case. The idea with Coyote is actually that he is working hand in hand with Creator in order to bring new thoughts and new concepts and changes to the world, because the world grows stagnant. You see this in our society today and in our culture today, where people have become very stagnant in their ways of thinking. They've become very ignorant in their ways of thinking. They think that going to work, coming home, popping open the beer, watching football, going to sleep, and doing the whole thing over again tomorrow is sort of the end all and be all of life. And that they have become in that rut, in that stagnation. So Coyote is there to, I guess you could say, bring on the chase so that a new order of things can be brought about, so that the rut is broken, so that the pattern or the mold that you fall into, going into some of the things that I discuss sometimes, is broken, and therefore you can proceed into a new aspect of your life, and maybe into a more beneficial one. So instead of being stuck in the rut of going to work, coming home, drinking your beer, watching TV, going to bed, and getting up and doing the whole thing over again tomorrow, is an unhealthy lifestyle. It's an uneventful lifestyle. It is something that is very complacency driven. And so with Coyote putting on the chase, you have to grow stronger. You have to become more powerful. You have to become more cunning yourself in order to avoid being bitten by Coyote, and so on and so forth. So the idea of the chase, again, the whole rabbit/coyote thing, it all really is an important aspect to the cultural mythology and the idea of well, we don't have to live life in this same way. We can change things for the better, even if you think that the changes are bad, even if you think that the changes that are occurring are not something that you really want to go through. By the time everything is said and done and you look back and you see that the changes that you've made are much more beneficial for you, that hindsight 2020 kind of thing, you start to realize, well, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. And maybe I can actually say thank you to Coyote for throwing some of that chaos into my life in order to become better. That's the way to look at it, you know? So the idea with the order out of chaos follows the idea of the medicine wheel. Now, the medicine wheel is something that's extremely important in Native mythology and in the way that life basically is lived. The medicine wheel, which is sometimes called the sacred hoop, has been used for thousands of years by different tribes for concentration, healing purposes, health, just it embodies the four directions. So north, south, east, west, as well as Father Sky, Mother Earth, Spirit Tree. All of these symbolize different cycles of life and different ways of living, different life purposes. The medicine wheel takes on a lot of different forms. It can be something as simple as, a piece of art, like a drawing or something like that. One popular way of doing the medicine wheel is to do it as a sand painting, where different colors of sand are used to create the figures, the wheel itself and the spokes of the wheel, and all of the different emblematic symbols that are ingrained into it as a way to tell the story of the medicine wheel. It can be as simple as that, but it can also be very large. It can be like a huge physical construct. There have been, thousands of different medicine wheels that have been found all across North America over the past 200 years, really. But the medicine wheels that are like that, they're huge. They're made out of stone. You can almost look at them as being similar to the Nazca lines, as an example. Some of them, I think the largest one that's been found was found to be about 75 feet across. And that's, huge, right? They're created over many different generations, actually, the ones that are like that. In Native American ceremonies, most ceremonies are very circular in nature or cyclical in nature. They go in a clockwise kind of a direction. This helps to align, I guess, with the different forces of nature, like the rising and the setting of the sun and so on and so forth. Different tribes, I guess you could say, interpret the medicine wheel in different ways. It just kind of depends on the tribe itself and where they come from and what they consider to be central to their belief structure. Because, of course, obviously, every tribe, although they might have similar belief structures, they all come at them from slightly different directions, depending on what they themselves consider to be sacred. So, for instance, some of them might use plants in their medicine wheels. That the plants like tobacco and sweetgrass and cedar and sage are sacred plants. These are sacred, ceremonial, ritualistic plants, and these are placed in different positions and quantities within the medicine wheel, both within it and on the edges of it and so forth. And some medicine wheels are actually created entirely out of these things. They will plant the seeds to grow in a medicine wheel formation by the time all is said and done. There are others like birth and youth and adult and death, those 4 stages, those 4 directions of all of life. There are the seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall. The different, like I said, the different aspects of the medicine wheel, they all relate to the directions of the compass, but they also relate to these different ceremonial type of circumstances. So the hoop dance is an offshoot of the medicine wheel. Now, the hoop dance, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a hoop dance being performed, but it is an amazing spectacle. If you go to YouTube, and I'll have a link to a couple of them that I've found to be really fascinating on my show notes for this show, which again will be at openeyesnetwork.com. You'll find these at /OE080. But I'll have a couple of videos for you guys. But you could go to YouTube and look up hoop dance, and you'd be fascinated by some of the skill at which these hoop dances are performed. But the hoop dances are extremely ritualistically significant. They have a deep, sacred meaning to them. And it just depends on who's performing it. And I guess you could say the frame of mind that they're performing it in. So the hoop dance goes back for many centuries and possibly even thousands of years. Nobody really knows for sure, but it's a way of telling a story. It's a dance that tells a story. It incorporates about 40 hoops to create different shapes that are both like dynamically formed and statically formed. These formations, they represent the movements of different animals and their actions, I guess you could say, their interactions, and also other storytelling elements like the sun, the sky, stars, and that sort of thing. The dance was originally believed to have originated as a healing ceremony, which was, I guess you could say, designed to restore balance and harmony to the earth. And again, this is something that's been passed down for thousands of years. It's been very well established that it goes back for that long of a period of time. And it's very sacred. Since the hoop has no beginning or end, it's just a circle, it represents the never-ending circle of life. So the hoops, which are typically made out of like wood slats, reeds, that sort of thing, they're used to create these different shapes, which are including like butterflies, turtles, flowers, snakes, all of that stuff. There's some that say that the creator gave these series of wooden hoops and the dance to a dying man from the northern plains who wanted a gift to leave behind after he passed away. Another one that was from the Southwest says that the hoops were developed by cliff dwellers so that their children could learn dexterity, better dexterity, basically better use of their fingers and their hands, in an effort to help them climb, hunt, fish, that sort of thing. I wanted to read this to you. I thought this was really interesting. A more prominent legend has that the hoop dance originated in the Anishinaabe culture, when an unearthly spirit was born to live amongst the people. The boy did not show any interest in typical boys' activities such as running and hunting, preferring to be alone and watch the animals. This caused his father to shun him and earn him the name Pukewis, the disowned or unwanted. However, the boy continued to watch the movements of eagles, bears, snakes, and birds, and before long he was spinning like an eagle in flight, hopping through the grass like a rabbit, and created the hoop dance to teach the other Indians about the ways of the animals. Before long, Pukewis was so popular that every village wanted to learn the dance. So the hoop dance today is still something that's really, really popular. It's usually performed by a solo dancer, although there have been times where it's been done by multiple people putting on like an exposition at a convention or a large powwow gathering, just sort of for display purposes. But in a traditional hoop dance, in the actual sacred ceremony of the hoop dance, it is just a solo dancer who begins with a single hoop, and that's sort of symbolizing the circle of life. So additional hoops are added as the dance progresses to represent other life elements, including the different animals, water, and so on. And they're really fascinating. Again, I really recommend going and watching one of these hoop dances and understand that as you're watching it, it's sort of going from the beginning of creation all the way forward. And when you have that in mind, when you have that story of it in mind, it becomes that much more poignant because it really does represent something that has been passed down that really has been lost. So hoop dances and the hoops and the medicine wheels and all of this all relate to the dream catchers. And of course, I think everybody is pretty much familiar with dream catchers, although you may not know the originations of them or why they're significant. But in the end, really, the dream catchers are an extension of the medicine wheel. The night air is filled with dreams that are both good and bad. And when a dream catcher is hung over or near the place that you're sleeping and it swings freely in the air, it catches the dreams as they come by. The good dreams know how to pass through the dream catcher. They slip through the little outer holes and slide down feathers in a really gentle way. So gentle, in fact, that most of the time the person who's asleep doesn't even know that they're dreaming. The bad dreams don't know the way through, so they get tangled into the dream catcher and they die when the first light of a new day dawns. And I find that to be really fascinating. It works for me. I've always slept with dream catchers, and the times that I've not had dream catchers are the times that I have bad dreams. So I sleep with dream catchers, and in fact, we have a pretty massive collection of them in our house. I think pretty much darn near every window is covered with dream catchers. But to most people, I guess you could say most people just find them to be pretty decorations, but there really is a lot of truth to the idea of the dream catcher, and especially since it is this extension of the medicine wheel. It's an offshoot of it, and it really is a sacred, important aspect to the native culture. Now, another thing that is very sacred is something that I think we need to have today, and that is the idea of the contrarians. They're also called the Hyoka, which is essentially people that are backwards. They live backwards, you could say. They're upside down. They're contrary in nature. They do things like, they would do things like riding a horse backwards. They would wear their clothes inside out. They'd speak in a backwards language. So if food was scarce, for example, a contrarian or a Hyoka would sit around and complain about how full he was. And it's sort of, I guess you could say, a way of satirizing what actually is going on in society. The Hyoka were considered to be sacred clowns. That's essentially what it comes down to. They served a very important role in shaping how the tribes acted and reacted with each other. They had no care about rules. They didn't care about social norms. They didn't care about boundaries. But by violating these norms, by violating these taboos, they actually helped to define social boundaries and societal guidelines for ethical behavior, essentially. This is because they're the only ones who can say why about sensitive topics and employ satire to question the specialists and the carriers of sacred knowledge or those in positions of power and authority. Their role was to penetrate deception, turn over rocks, and create a deeper awareness. So I guess you could say actually in a lot of ways, I am actually a contrarian myself. I am actually what would be classed as a Hyoka, because I do exactly that. I speak out against what has not been spoken. I point out the taboos. I laugh at them and I cut right through them, and I'm not afraid to talk about them, and I'm not afraid to question things. So it's I guess in a lot of ways I follow the Hyoka tradition. Hyoka, by the way, is a Lakota word. It just means contrary. It just means a sacred clown. It means somebody who's living backwards. So again, you can just think contrarian, and that's essentially what it is. So I'm starting to run a little short on time, but I wanted to make sure to also include in this episode the idea that Native Americans were actually responsible for inspiring the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And a lot of people don't know this. In fact, most people don't know this. But the U.S. Constitution actually owes many of its notions on democratic government to the Iroquois Confederacy. In fact, in Senate Resolution 331 from the 100th Congress in 1988, the Senate acknowledged that the confederation of the original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles upon which we incorporated into were incorporated into the Constitution itself. Now, I'll have a link to that Senate resolution for you guys so that you could see it for yourselves. But that really is a fact. The Constitution was essentially based upon a lot of the ideas and idealism that was contained in the Iroquois Confederacy Constitution as well. And they have flat out admitted it. The Iroquois Confederacy was a confederation of Native American tribes that was originally composed of 5 different tribes: the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and Seneca. There were more that were added at a later time. The Great Law of Peace, which was the basis of the Iroquois Confederacy Constitution, was brought forth to the tribes by the prophet Daganoweda and the spokesman for him, Hiawatha. Daganoweda, had speech problems, which I apparently do tonight as well. But Hiawatha basically spoke in his place, much like actually Moses and Aaron, where Aaron spoke for Moses because Moses couldn't talk very well. So the same thing kind of happened here with the Iroquois Confederacy. Now, another thing that's interesting as well is that within many Native American tribes, the women would be the ones to decide who the chief would be, and the chief would be responsible for the day-to-day decisions about the tribe. if at any time the chief failed in his duties, he'd actually be removed by a vote of the women. So what a great way to keep things balanced. So you have this chief who was, the end all and be all, quote unquote, and the ruler of the tribe, but he was put in place by the women, and the women could at any time say, "You're out, buddy," and replace him with a new person. So the chief basically had to make sure that everything was kept in balance. It was really a great way to maintain a balance within the tribes. And this idea of equality, this type of equality, was prevalent very heavily through all of the Native American tribes. And yet, for so many years, people have been taught the idea that the Indians had to be tamed because they were savages, that the Indians had to be subjected because they did not know what civilization is. They were savages. They were unclean. They were on and on and on. And it really is a horrible situation to see how the native tribes have been so blatantly mistreated for so long of a period of time, and they still are to this day. And guys, I had so much more that I wanted to talk about with all of this, but unfortunately I am out of time. This is not the only time I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to get into more of this subject actually probably next week, and get into some of the topics that I couldn't discuss. So with that, if you guys want to go to the show notes for this show, you can go to openeyesnetwork.com/OE080. I'll have the links to all the news stories that I had here, as well as to the stories that I gave you guys here in this episode. I hope you guys were entertained by this one. I brought it out with the idea that maybe these are things that people have not really heard before, and I thought you guys might find them interesting. I know I do. I'm always interested in the stories that came from the people in my past. So if you want to get a hold of me, you can send me an email at feedback@openeyesnetwork.com. You can go to my Facebook and Twitter pages. Those are both at Open Eyes Network. They're also at Ira Robinson on both of those platforms. And on Wednesday, be sure to tune in. I will be broadcasting at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Not sure what the topic is yet, but I'll let you guys know. Be sure to stick around. Michael Vera will bring you Late Night in the Midlands in just a few minutes. And until next time, guys, keep safe out there and have fun. And thank you so much for listening. Again, tune in on Wednesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, latenightinthemidlands.com.